Hello and welcome. It's just after 1:30 p.m. here on the Gadigal Lands in Sydney and time for the Startup Daily Show live from Barangaroo. For the next 30 minutes, 60 actually, there you go, double the amount. I'm going to take you behind Australia's startup community, talking to founders, investors, many others in the tech ecosystem. I'm Simon Thompson, editor of StartupDaily.net, and a little bit tired after a massive South by Southwest in Sydney this week. Plenty of great events. We're going to get to a couple of them a little later in the show, including, of course, last night's massive StartMate Demo Day, and most importantly, the big pitch event. We're going to meet the winner that happened yesterday afternoon. Well, let's have a look at who I will be speaking to, and in any second now, it's going to be Lisa Milani, the CEO of Nanocube, mother of a young person who she's also busy juggling whilst building a startup. After that, we're going to talk with Dexter Cousins from Tier 1 People. Don't know if you saw the discussion this week. KPMG has been talking to CEOs. Around about 2/3 of them think that people are going to be back in the office full-time within the next 3 years. Might be what the boss wants, certainly to get their bonus, but is it what the staff want? We'll plough through that with Dexter once again a little later on. We'll be also catching up with Joel Hanrahan from Everedge Global. Of course, AI, everyone loves AI right now, but what happens when you've done some work based on AI and you realise that's not your intellectual property? There was a ruling in the US last month around the fact that you can't copyright an AI-produced product. So we're going to delve into that after a column on Startup Daily today. James Alston from Orchestra Energy is going to join us. They've just raised $2 million in a seed round led by Tidal Ventures, not Tribal, Tidal Ventures. And we're also going to catch up with Simon Doherty from Follow. They've put out the new 4th annual State of Open Banking report. We'll delve into that because things seem to be slowing down. Is that for the better or the worse? We're going to catch up with Tam Al-Saad from Fura, which is helping deal with loneliness. It's a startup that is raising on the crowdfunding platform On Market. We'll find out what that's all about. And we're going to finish out with Isaac Coonan from Venture On, which has been busy acquiring another investment firm. Well, we've seen plenty of M&A deals in the startup sector. Maybe it's about time all of those VCs, because there are plenty of them about, started merging as well. But before we do all of that, let's do our top tech tweet of today. And one of the world's busiest people, Ed Husic, of course the Federal Science and Innovation Minister, was in Sydney last night at South by Southwest for the StartMate Demo Day. This is the biggest and best demo day I've ever been to, he said. And as the team at StartMate said, absolute honour to have the Minister there to close Demo Day with the closing address. More than 1,000 people jammed into the theatre at the ICC last night to hear from a bunch of great startups. You'll be able to read about them on Startup Daily. But it wasn't the only big pitch that was happening at South by Southwest this week. Yesterday was the SXSW Sydney Pitch Grand Final with 6 finalists spanning biodiversity, spacesuits, gaming, medtech and more, making their case to investors from Blackbird, Airtree and Google MD Mel Silva, amongst others. Well, there was a winner in the end. It's the Melbourne medical robotics startup Nanocube Health. Co-founder Lisa Milani is one of those rare people who can literally say she's helping find a cure for cancer. She joins me right now. Lisa, well done, congrats. What an epic afternoon. Again, a packed room with the crowd going wild. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to and what you are doing, because you told an amazing and deeply moving story in terms of what your company has set out to achieve.
Thank you, Simon. So we're building bio-inspired nanorobots that are designed to early detect and treat pancreatic cancer and beyond. For those that may not know, half of people with pancreatic cancer die within 3 months of diagnosis, and 90% only survive less than 5 years. So statistics are really stark, made worse by the asymptomatic nature of the disease and a lack of screening tools. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve.
And one of the other awful things about this particular cancer is, you don't want anyone to get a cancer, but this is a particularly nasty and painful one for people to have to go through, and, really tough on the families as well as the people involved. Now, this sounds really cool. Tell us about this nanobots thing, because, as I said yesterday, I have this vision of a TV series I used to watch as a kid called Fantastic Voyage, where everyone got miniaturized, went in a submarine into your bloodstream to find out what was going on. Is that what you're doing?
Maybe not exactly. So the nano robotics technology we're working on is designed to take advanced cellular level imaging and to take tissue analysis without the need for a biopsy. It's also designed to deliver targeted therapy, but where we add value is through real-time monitoring technology that allows treatment progress to be monitored in real time to enhance clinical decision making.
Great. So you won yesterday. I think you get a whole bunch of support from a range of organisations. What does winning mean? Did you have a whole bunch of people come up and want to throw money at you as a consequence?
Not yet, but hopefully soon. Really for us, winning means more people knowing about what we're working on, and hopefully more people wanting to connect with us and partner with us so that we can take this technology to the market.
Okay, so in terms of this build, what sort of timeframes are we looking at? When I was asked, because we were asked in the audience to sort of choose a favourite, I did love your deep tech solution, but I also know that deep tech does take a long time. You've got regulatory hurdles and approvals you'll need to go through. Every time we do hear of a solution for cancer, everyone gets terribly excited, but we're talking quite long lead times, I imagine. When would we see a product on market?
Yeah, so it is a deep tech technology, and we're seeing this as a marathon, not a sprint. We anticipate that time to market is around 8 years. So there is some time between now and then, but we have made some good progress, and we're just fighting the good fight, I suppose.
So you've got this partnership with Deakin University, and I think at the moment you're currently fundraising, looking for around about $500,000 as part of a bigger round. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're working in partnership with Deakin University, who are helping us to build the nanorobots. We have our eyes set on completing the laboratory studies so that we can get closer and closer to animal studies. So to achieve that, we're needing to fundraise about $2 million, and at this stage we're raising $500,000.
Lisa, one of the things that sort of struck me, you sort of told the story of Paul Deere, of course the Hawks footballer who unfortunately did get pancreatic cancer, was diagnosed at stage 4 and sadly passed away a couple of years later. What was it that inspired you to go down this path with your co-founder, Dr. Sean Cousins? I mean, I'm always really interested in why founders are so driven to create such extraordinary businesses.
Thank you. My co-founder lost a loved one to a difficult to diagnose and treat cancer after a very short time. And that really ignited a passion and a drive to find a solution to tackle these big problems and to use the skills that he has as a nanoscientist to achieve that.
And as you do go around and talk to people about what you do, talk to investors about your ambitions, what is the reaction like? What are they saying? Because when I heard it, I just thought, wow, this is quite mind-blowing.
I think that the reaction is often that people are excited about what we're working on. And I think that people can see that big problems need a different way of thinking and different solutions. So I think there's a sense of excitement about what's possible in the future.
Lisa, great to have you on the show today from Nanocube. Congrats again on winning the South by Southwest Pitch Grand Final. Such an amazing story. Look forward to following it on Startup Daily down the track. All the best with that raise.
Thank you.
All right, well, now let's turn our attention to the debate over returning to the office, which stepped up another notch this week, with 2/3 of more than 1,000 CEOs surveyed by the consulting firm KPMG believing that workers will return to the office 5 days a week within the next 3 years. It's kind of interesting because just here in Sydney today, New South Wales Health said it's shutting down an office in Parramatta where 800 people were housed because no one's going there. So, well, are those CEOs right? But is it a good idea? And well, to discuss what he's seeing in the recruitment space, Startup Daily regular Dexter Cousins from Tier 1 People joins me once again. Dexter, great to have you back. We talk about the ups and downs in the employment landscape. Everyone is still find a way forward on this, especially in an era of quite strong employment, if not full employment. What's the vibe that you're sensing, especially after you read what the KPMG survey had to say?
Yeah, I'm really not sure what to make of it, Simon. I think what it illustrates is what I've been saying for the last 3 years. The biggest issue that we've got is the expectation gap. And I think this is what business leaders are struggling with. And I think it's also what employees are struggling with as well. So actually only last weekend, I came across some research from the UK, which kind of perfectly illustrated this expectation gap. And they similarly, I think, interviewed 1,000 employees and 1,000 employers from tech businesses in the UK, and they asked 2 questions. First question was, are fully remote employees as productive as in-office employees? Now, the answer from the employer was around about 50% said yes, they are as productive. Around about 25% said no, and around about 25% weren't sure. So we had some kind of clear delineations there.
I think that's a clear idea of management with that 25% that has no idea what's going on, Dexter.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then if you kind of ask that same question to talent, 81% of talent believe that they are as effective or productive as in-office employees. Another, I think 7% said not sure, and 12% were no. So I think what we see from that is that you've almost got, kind of, a polarizing kind of expectation of where, where the productivity issues actually are. Now, so far, we've not heard any of our clients, anybody in our network, mandating a full return to the office. I think everybody's settled on this hybrid model. Still not, I think, working as well as some businesses would like, but I think a lot of that is down to just the pressures that everybody's feeling from the economy. And I think there's, on the employee side, you've got other pressures there, which are just, we've got the whole thing around mental health and burnout. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of people are exhausted from, the last few years and the changes that we've had. But also, I think there are some now kind of studies coming through that are showing that the isolation that people are experiencing working from home, fully working remotely, is also having an impact on their mental health and well-being, which you then have to assume would have some impact on productivity and ability to get work done.
Dexter, the headline that came out of this was the 5 days a week thing. So the idea is you're going to be doing 38 hours in the office. Is it really just a debate over deciding how much we need to be in there? Because I think everyone kind of agrees that bringing everyone together so that we can look each other in the eye, have those small interactions is a really important part, not just of camaraderie, but also the creative process when it comes to people working together.
Yeah, well, you've hit the nail on the head, Simon. So I actually did some research and collated that research with a business that we know, Crew Mojo, who are actually a performance management platform. Their kind of data sample was a lot broader than mine. So they covered both startups, large corporates, and NGOs. But we both came from our data sets the same conclusion. And that is what you've touched upon there, is that for the creation phase of a business, now, whether that's a startup or whether you're launching a new product or whether that's just going through a transformation, it's critical that you get people together and you kind of have that in-person interaction. And it really helps with the kind of collaborative process and creation process. But then there are other aspects of work where that person's not required to be in the office at all. And I think what we're seeing, and one of the things that's really struck me is that if you look throughout this last 3-year period, there's been very little support for leaders on how do you actually lead dispersed teams. And there's been very little kind of change in the KPIs and also the kind of kind of productivity measures that businesses are using to actually assess kind of I'd say clearly whether people are being productive or not. So I think what we're seeing is perhaps the CEOs who are at the top are very removed from what's actually going on in the business on a day-to-day basis, and so they're seeing these headline numbers, and I think the kind of reaction, knee-jerk reaction, is right. We need to get everybody back in the office. Which, look, I think we've seen in every single economic downturn. Whether it was in the GFC where I was able to work from home, and then as soon as I wasn't making any money, it was back in the office 5 days a week. So I think we're seeing a very much a traditional kind of reaction to what is a problem that probably isn't stemming from people working remotely.
Yeah, Dexter, I was probably a little bit mean to that 25% earlier, because I think the point that you raise is an important one. In terms of how do we sort of manage people when we don't get to see them on a daily basis? And I have to say that, even when we are all in the office, it doesn't necessarily mean that your managers are really good at what they're doing to begin with.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a big opportunity on this front? And I look at, of course, the acquisition for more than $1 billion that Atlassian made the other day of a video company that sort of helps you document what's going on and be able to speak to people in an asynchronous video, so that everyone is on the same page when it comes to what they need to do and how they do it.
Yeah, I think that technology here isn't really the solution, Simon. I think what we need to have is everybody needs to have some real honest discussions. And I think we have to accept that there are some people who are working remotely that are taking advantage of that and not working as hard as others. We have to accept that some of our leaders are not equipped right now to be able to lead remotely. We have to accept that there are some things that the business isn't doing that from a systems process, technology and support perspective, that they could be doing better as well. And I think it's only by having those kind of honest discussions, which I think the reason why they're not happening is because they're so volatile, right? And it's very difficult for organizations, to kind of tread this line between being, ethical and responsible employers who are absolutely interested in the welfare of their staff, but also then, the challenges that you have around legally if you take the wrong approach, and what that means, for reputation, legal consequences and financial consequences as well. So I think there's probably, I think, a need for, one, utilizing technology better, but two, I think it's just more people just being honest around, their performance. And I think accepting as well that the environment that we're in is, we're not in ZERP times anymore. There's a lot of pressure on everybody, and leaders feel the mental health issues as much as the team do as well.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, Dexter, if we're all as good as our jobs as we think we are, we probably wouldn't need managers to boot us up the backside occasionally anyway, would we?
I think this is kind of part of the issue, Simon, is that, everybody in that survey that I mentioned, the data that's based on is actually asking people, do you think you perform better from home, right? Now, I'm concerned that we're kind of in a world whereby people have become their own kind of judge, jury, and executioner on their own performance at work. I think you have to have performance reviews. And the interesting thing with the guys at Crew Mojo is that they had found that during that period of 2020 kind of first lockdown through to 2022, most businesses had actually stopped doing performance reviews because they didn't think it was actually fair to their people to be putting them through that process when we had such turmoil going through the workplace with lockdowns and trying to work remotely and trying to kind of make that transition. So I think that's perhaps the other thing that maybe we're seeing with the CEOs is if performance reviews have started again, they've seen that performance has dropped off and they're getting a bit concerned, and their answer to it is, let's get everybody back in the office.
Now, finally, Dexter, I just want to ask more broadly about the state of play, because you do work with a lot of tech companies and tech people. We've gone through sort of the layoffs of the last nearly 18 months now. There's still a shortage and a strong demand, and of course we're seeing some companies growing along the way. And even in this particular report, there was I think a comment that only 5% of the CEOs thought they would be laying off people over the next few years. So it seems like that idea of strong full employment is going to continue for at least a couple of years yet. What's happening in the tech space?
Well, despite the egg cartons behind me, I'm not quitting the recruitment job. So it's it's the busiest that we've been for 2 years, Simon. However, what I would say is that there's definitely been a shift in talent. So even the really kind of specialist roles like data scientists, we're running a search at the minute. There's been an ad put up. We've had over 500 responses. And most of those people are really well qualified, well experienced people. So I think the kind of high level numbers that we're seeing around unemployment, I just really question them, and I just really question, particularly with reference to the tech scene. There's certain pockets of it where there's a lot of people that are hurting. So marketing has been massively impacted by layoffs, and we're not seeing new jobs coming into the market. Talent acquisition and HR is the same as well. So whilst tech talent, I think, is fairly safe, sales, marketing, all of those operational areas have been really impacted by layoffs. And because of the lack of funding, when we're seeing businesses not rehire staff if they are laying off. So I think it's very much a kind of two-speed economy, those who have and those who don't. And I think that's going to kind of keep a little bit more of a sensible balance in terms of the kind of the talent supply and demand issues.
Well, Dexter, I'm glad you're not going to free-range egg farming, because you did look like you were set up for it. But I know, of course, you do a great podcast. So as soundproofing goes, it just shows that you're careful with money and clever in terms of solutions.
Yep, a sign of the times.
Dexter, always great to get your insights. Your insights. Your insults are damn good too, mate, but we'll keep those between us.
That was not a Freudian slip, I think.
But your insights are fantastic too. Thanks for joining us from Tier 1 People. Good as well. I look forward to more insults from you soon.
Thanks, Simon. Have a great week.
You too, mate. All right, well, let's go to another big debate, and this one is about artificial intelligence, which is transforming business. But one area that companies are tending to overlook is the intellectual property ownership of work generated by AI. A US court recently ruled that work made by it can't be copyrighted. But does that mean a free-for-all for stealing AI-based ideas from each other? To explore the issues, Joel Hanrahan from the legal advisory group Everedge Global joins me now. Joel, great to have you on the show. This was a conversation that I kind of was thinking about when you guys wrote a piece that absolutely nailed some of the things that had me awake at night. But take us through what's going on so people understand, because I think at this point in time, everyone's going, how amazing is this tool? I can just throw it into DALL-E or ChatGPT-4 and away I go. But there are bigger issues at play here.
Yeah, there really are. Simon, and it is a wonderful tool. It's a great sort of, we're on the cusp of a next phase of great innovation, which is fantastic. But commercialization terms, we just want to make sure that there is a proper legal framework around being able to generate something original and then being able to protect it. And it's really interesting, actually. It might be worth just giving a little bit of background on copyright period. So copyright is basically an automatic right. It's as a creator, you own something, and the burden of proof for the creator is actually quite high. And what's interesting about it is the legal framework that defends this is about sort of 10 to 20 years behind. Whilst innovation has been rocketing ahead, including now AI, the laws that represent this and protect it haven't really kept up. For instance, the test that legal professionals still use for copyright infringement now is WAMO versus Lincoln, and that's back in 1984. So there's basically some things to consider when you're thinking about copyright. It basically covers any work of authorship from being reproduced, and there's really sort of 3 steps to think about there. The test for copying is firstly like a substantial reproduction of the work. 2 has to be a causal connection. So, for example, you can prove that this person read the book and copied a page from your book. And thirdly, there has to be an objective similarity. So sort of side by side, you can say, yes, this is definitely a copy of that. Now, that's first-hand infringement. But where AI starts to play a role is this notion of second-hand infringement, which involves an intermediary. And it creates some really interesting sort of issues, I suppose. And there's really 3 main vectors for people to consider. There's the input, there's the AI itself, and then there's the output. Right? So the input is, do you own what you're inputting? For example, organisations now are using data to train AI so it can be more useful for them in their work or in the production of some end product. So if you're using training data, for example, do you have the right to use it, or are you infringing on somebody else's rights? So that's the input. And then there's the AI itself, right? So think of like the chat GPT. Is it infringing on somebody else's rights? Is it sort of scrubbing down from the internet, for example, and some of the information it's pulling down hasn't been licensed? So to get around that, shadow libraries are being created, basically. So pirated content, which is effectively what it is. So is the AI tool, and then you, as being a part of that, you're actually using pirated content. And then there's the output, which we all love from using ChatGPT, and there's sort of 2 aspects to this. There's the infringement aspect, and that's pretty unclear, right? Infringement is unclear. So how much of your finished product, for example, that's been created is using infringing data, and how much of it's sort of infringing on somebody else's end product? So that's the infringing bit. And then there's the ownership bit, and that's what we all want. So you've sort of got an entrepreneur and you're working away in your garage and you come up with something great. You want to be able to protect it so you can deploy it into the marketplace, right? So and so the ownership becomes very unclear now too. And that's what a few people are finding with their creations with some of these recent legal cases, is that courts are ruling, well, you didn't really create it, AI created it. So how can you then sort of claim, you actually own it? Now, if you think that you can claim that, well, then how can you protect yourself against somebody else using it down the track and you saying, no, hang on a sec, that's mine? And what a lot of people don't realise is about copyright is it's sort of similar to patents. As I mentioned before, the copyright basically says, okay, you're the creator, you own it. But the burden of proof to actually establish that is very high. And similar to patents, there's no patent police around the world. There's no sort of copyright police as such. So it's less of a shield and more of a sword. You've got to be able to go and protect it. And so you've got to be able to think to yourself, well, can I actually protect it to begin with to stop other people infringing on my rights? So if all of that sounded like a huge grey area, well, that's because it is. It
sounds slightly terrifying on Friday afternoon. I need to go to the pub and think about it. But, look, there are a couple of things going on here. I mean, sure. One of the things I thought was fascinating was that Canva, of course, which everyone is using to create images and things the other day, came out with an enterprise AI product where it said it will indemnify the businesses. I thought that was a really big tell, because what they were saying to their customers is, do not worry, no one is going to come after you if you do inadvertently infringe copyright in using our product. Clever on their side.
Yes,
but then I look at things like the Getty Images case, where they're suing the AI company Stability AI over the fact that so many, as you pointed out, companies in this space are harvesting other people's work. Australian authors have been saying the same thing after thousands of them found that their books were being taken for AI training. Let's go to the legislative side. As you said, going back to 1984, I'm thinking an Apple Mac probably had about 40 meg of RAM in its hard drive at that point in time. We have moved on a bit. Is it up to the legislators, or do we just have to slug this out in the courts for precedent? Because, of course, all of these arguments do end up in court anyway. You know, we have plenty of patent fights, irrespective of AI, over who's nicked what from whom. This seems to just add an extra level of uncertainty to that particular issue.
Yeah, and I think that right there, Simon, wraps it up very well. Actually, I think like any area of law, the greater the body of precedent, the easier it is then for the authorities to be able to sort of sort through it, or you yourself to be able to think, well, I'm clearly infringing there, or I'm not infringing. I'll be able to protect that or not. The big issue here is there just isn't that body of precedent. So invariably, I think I can pretty safely predict the future here and say in the forming of that precedent, there's going to be some big cases, some big fines, almost certainly. And I would just sort of on a practical level, just challenge people who are using AI at the moment, either commercially or even for their own purposes, think, well, do I really need it? I mean, is it really creating the efficiency we think it is? Because, you know, you may well be quite significantly or even in a small way infringing on somebody else's. And even if it's not the infringement thing, if you've created this great thing with the aid of AI, well, chain of title is the great issue, right? One of the examples we use when it comes to software, even excluding AI, is, you know, if you and I, Simon, start a software company and we're working on something over here, then you leave and I get a contractor in place and things like that happen all the way to the end creation of the software. Well, how can I warrant that I actually own it when so many different people had a part in it? So it may be worth at this point, until that body of evidence is formed, is really more critically look at the use of AI and think, well, how useful is it really at this point? How great a risk do I want to take, and how great a gain am I getting on? So what's the real return on investment? Just like any decision commercially that we need to think of, because it is the Wild West at the moment. And I think invariably, like in the formation of any precedent, there are going to be some big hits to some big infringers to start to form that body of legal precedent.
Joel, if we can hear some distant yelling and cheering, it sounds like that's the lawyers as the AI gets rolled out. Look, your colleague Caitlin Burnett, who is a patent attorney, has written a great piece for us today for startupdaily.net about protecting AI-generated innovation, exploring all the issues we've discussed today. I would urge everyone to read it. Great to have you on the show today with your insights. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Simon.
Well, it has been a big week for venture capital funding for Australian startups, with Employment Hero banking more than 260 million in the Series A. There was another 120 mil for the Canberra satellite navigation system, Skycraft. But there are plenty of other notable raises too, including $2 million in seed funding, pretty big seed that one, for the clean energy startup Orchestra in a round led by Tidal Ventures. To tell us about the company and its plans at Orchestra, I'm joined by co-founder James Alston. James, welcome to the show. Congrats on the raise. For people who are just hearing about Orchestra for the first time, tell us about the business.
So Orchestra is a piece of software that provides feasibility modeling for commercial and industrial new energy projects. So new energy is solar, it's batteries, it's electric vehicle chargers. And the big gap until now has been that this type of modeling in the commercial industrial space is very challenging. It, historically required an analyst to spend several days potentially modeling these types of projects. And we've taken a lot of that knowledge that we built up as consultants, put this into a piece of software, and now someone who is a salesperson or a junior analyst can use our software and prepare this sort of analysis in 15 to 20 minutes. So it's a massive game changer.
We've just come off this conversation about AI. It sounds like real people intelligence being deployed on this one. So the 2 mil with Tidal leading the round, what does that mean for the business?
Yeah, so we've done very well to date. So we've actually grown, about 225% just in this year. We've actually got around, got most of the tier 1 and tier 2 solar and energy companies using our software here in Australia. So we're kind of needing to get out of Australia. This is a very interesting market. It's a very advanced market globally. We have the highest penetration of rooftop solar in the world. What we're seeing is that this is a great market to develop a software like Orchestra, but actually the job is now to take this globally. So we actually need a vast amount of solar and batteries to be deployed to get on track for net zero. So we actually need around 3 times as much solar to be deployed per annum compared to 2020 every single year to 2030, and 26 times as many batteries. And we're only going to do that if we improve the productivity and efficiency of these solar installers that are out there in the market today. And this is not just a problem that exists in Australia, but it's global. So we're very keen to try and take our software and deploy it globally to improve the efficiency of these companies around the world.
All right, well, you probably answered my next question there, the global opportunity. Just give us an idea of the market. We talk about it in Australia all the time, but that shift to renewable energy and getting it into the grid and everything is a challenge a lot of software companies are working with. And of course, it is, as you pointed out, those lead time things. This is the bet. We've set ourselves this 2050 goal, but at the rate we can move at right now, we can't get there in time. How much is it going to be companies like Orchestra helping to make it happen?
It's essential. Like, we're just one part of the chain, right? We're trying to improve the what's happening right at the very, very start of a project. So, you've got a long chain from, initial lead to coming in to the final deployment of it. But we see it as a chicken and egg problem, right? So we want to make it really easy for companies to identify leads, qualify them very, very quickly, turn those leads into sales proposals and get these opportunities out into the world. We're trying to make this, basically try and make this as fast as possible for companies to go and do this. But yeah, this kind of productivity improvements is absolutely essential. If you think about those statistics that I gave you before, this is over a very short time period that we're trying to get on track to get to net zero. And we basically got to do this with the existing resources that we have today, right? So even if we can double the resources that we have today, we're looking at, needing to get to 3 to 26x times as many solar and batteries being deployed. So it really comes down to companies like Orchestra to improve the productivity and efficiencies of these solar installers and project developers that are out there.
The one way I describe it is probably a very big piece of toast and not a lot of butter. So I better let you get back to spreading it around. James Austin, thanks for joining us from Orchestra.
No worries, thanks very much.
Well, FinTech Follow has released the 4th edition of its State of Open Banking report this week. The new edition shows an ecosystem that is more realistic and less hyped. Well, where have we heard that before? Less distracted by what's next and more focused on delivering value for consumers today. Some are concerned that we're moving too slowly in the consumer data right. Follow Chief Customer Officer Simon Doherty joins me now to take us through the findings in the latest Open Banking report. Simon, welcome to the show. There has been this little argy-bargy over sort of one side sort of saying, we're coming up to 4 years down the track, it's not happening fast enough. And then the other side is sort of saying, we want to get this right, make sure it's working. What's the vibe of the thing from your perspective?
Yeah, well, we themed the report slowing down to speed up, and I think that that's kind of the vibe of how we see things as well. So we're really at a point now where there's a lot of really good things happening, but there are still things that we need to continue to work on and improve, and slowing down the process of continuing to look ahead and roll out new features of the consumer data right. And focus back on open banking so that the use cases that are out there in the market and the things that are happening can actually get traction and get to scale. And that's really what we want to see, both for the businesses that are involved and also for the consumers. And this is ultimately supposed to deliver value back to consumers. That's why it's called the consumer data right. Open banking is the first leg of that. And we need to get this right so that we can deliver that value to consumers.
And I think that's the important thing, isn't it? It's when the rubber hits the road part of it is the consumers. Just take us through some of the use case stuff that we're now starting to see, because I think everyone was going, yay, we're going to have all this data, but then there was a little bit of, now what do we do with it?
Yeah, very much so. The two leading use cases are really around lending, so giving a consumer an aggregated view or allowing a consumer to access an aggregated view of their financial world and then deliver that into a loan application process. And that's really the dominant use case that we're seeing out there in the market at the moment. The second one, which paradoxically was probably first to market, but is now running number two, is around money management. And again, that starts with being able to finally access all of your banking data in one place, and then do things like help people with budgeting, help people with bill tracking, and really give them a very good view of what steps to take to improve their finances. So those are the two dominant use cases. And then we say in the report there are currently 34 other use cases in the market, things like investment, various use cases around investment, various use cases around solar analytics, harking back to your previous guest, I believe. And so there is a range of use cases out there in the market now, and I think that's also one of the key things about slowing this down to get these use cases to scale. So improving the process of how open banking works to actually get these use cases up and to scale and delivering value back to consumers.
Of course, part of the whole CDR rollout is beyond open banking. It's going to go into things like telecommunications and energy. How much is it that rests on the shoulders of the fintech sector in terms of creating sort of, I suppose, a model and the use cases that then the others can adopt down the track? Because are the fundamentals the same around the implementation and use of the data, irrespective of the industry you're in, or is there a very specific banking aspect to it?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, probably one that will take a little while to get a proper answer to. I mean, we've seen the contemplation of so many different data sets under the consumer data right. Energy is out there now and it's available. We know that there are companies out there working with energy data. There was contemplated for telco, superannuation, insurance, those data sources to be made available, and those are the things that have been not gotten rid of, but put on the shelf for now and will happen at some point in the future. But I think the combination of those data sets is something that's really interesting. We certainly speak to banks who are now used to working with open banking data about what they could potentially do with something like combining energy data. And I think that's where it gets exciting also for fintechs. How can they innovate around that for things like solar panels and the lending that sits around those? And then what does that mean when they bring in superannuation and insurance and those other data sets? And those are the things that we see fintechs turning their attention to already. So there is now over or around, I think, 100 CDR representatives, most of which are fintechs in the ecosystem. And all of those are individual businesses that are looking at niche, not niche, I should say, but specific use cases that can either use a single set of data or the combination of that data, and the combination of that data will become more important as we see new sets roll through.
Simon, one of the things that stood out for me in the report is you asked, I think, more than 1,000 people what they thought. A majority, I think it was about 55%, didn't know what open banking was. That's fine. It's not exactly the sexiest name, but it does what it says on the packet. But they love the idea. Everyone thinks, yes, when you explain it to them, this is something that I would find really useful and I want. Do we have to worry about the brand, or do we just get on with the job? And a little bit like never understanding how a Ferrari engine works, you just know the car goes fast. Is that what Follow's doing?
Yeah, I think there are people that sit on both sides of that argument. We would probably like to see a little bit more awareness driven around for consumers around what open banking is. And that's really on the back of the security aspect of it. So, we've seen particularly this year, and I think even last year, some of the cybersecurity breaches that we've seen in the market with Optus and Medicare, the security of data has come forward a little bit in people's minds. And we certainly know it's come forward in businesses' minds. And and open banking solves for that. It's a regulated regime, and it's inherently secure. And so it's really it really does lean heavily on that aspect of it. I think for startups, the security is something that can help them also get traction in the market. For consumers, really, sorry, Simon. For consumers, we know that's important to them. I was talking to a lender the other day that does reverse mortgages, and they find a friction point when they're gathering data through other electronic means. And that friction point is really around, I'm not sure about how I should be sharing this data. And so they're looking to open banking to help them solve that as well.
It is a bunch of problems and pain points being solved along the way. Simon, for anyone who's interested, where can they get the Frollo report to take a dive into it?
If they go to frollo.com.au, they'll find a link to the State of Open Banking 2024 report. We produce it every year, and every year I think it goes from strength to strength. So thanks very much, Simon.
Well, let's keep rolling out those use cases because they are some cracking ones along the way. Thanks for your time, Simon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, 1 in 6 Australians experience loneliness, and Sydney is apparently one of the hardest places in the world to make friends, according to Time Out. Well, how do you do that when everyone's staring at their phone instead of smiling? Well, that's an issue that my next guest, Tam Al-Saad from Fura, is hoping to address. Fura is currently raising on the crowdfunding platform On Market, and Tam is here to tell us about it. Tam, welcome in.
Thank you very much.
This is one of those issues because there's plenty of moments where everyone's going, massive problem. What are we going to do about it? Tell us how you're dealing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Fora is essentially a matchmaking app for mates, not dates. When users sign up, they tell us all about their hobbies, their interests, their experiences, and their values. Then we've got an algorithm that matches them into groups of 4 based on all their commonalities. Once they've been matched, they select a time and a place to meet within the app, and then they meet up and see how it goes. There's no chatting, they literally just get straight into it, meeting in a bar or a cafe, having a conversation and hopefully becoming friends.
Great, so I can find some more Sydney Swan supporters rather than bumping into the Collingwood ones. Tell us how this idea came about. What drove you to sort of go down this path?
Well, I've hosted a monthly social club myself for the last 11 years, just so that I can meet people and bring people together and see how they connect and engage and interact. But when I moved here from the UK about 8 years ago now, I found myself working with startups and kind of found myself in a new city, not knowing many people, and thought, who am I going to go to sports with? Who am I going to go to gigs with? Who am I going to just have a beer and explore the city with? And I kind of came up with the idea then of just a matchmaking service that brought you together and brought you out. But it took me, kind of 6 years before I was settled in Australia, had a job and a visa and everything else that I could do. And then during lockdown, obviously seeing the impact of social isolation and what that had on everybody and just how lonely everybody was feeling, decided for a career change for myself and remembered the idea that I'd had before and decided this was a good time to give it a crack.
And obviously it's working. People are interested because I think you've got more than 9,000 users, more than 6,000 have had a crack at sort of meeting up. So it's making sense. Tell us a little bit about how the business works before we get into this crowdfunding campaign.
So from a business perspective, it's really simple. It's free for the users. It's a free app that they can download. They can do everything they want on the app for free. We make revenue by partnering with the venues that they meet in. So for each time that somebody turns up and rocks up to the venue pays us a fee for bringing them in. But we've also just expanded into doing more activity and experience-based things. So for example, we're just about to sign a deal with a nationwide bowling alley where people can come in and bowl together rather than just going for a beer or a cafe, and we take a clip of that ticket as well.
And I reckon that's the other cool thing, because sometimes it's just really hard if you have a particular passion or you like doing something to find someone else who wants to do it. Any parent knows with a discussion with their kids, let's go to the art gallery. Nah. It's nice to be able to find someone else who wants to do something like that with you. Tell us a little bit about this raise. What are you looking for? What are the plans for the cash?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, given that we are a community-based platform, I always had the vision, the dream that it would be part owned by the community, and crowdfunding allows us to do that. We just launched the campaign on Wednesday, and within 24 hours, we already had more than 100 people express their interest in investing in the business. we're hoping to raise a total of at least $500,000. That's my goal. And with that money, we're planning on expanding our revenue streams and finally starting to spend some money on marketing. We've only spent a fraction of money so far to acquire the 9,000 members. It's been easier than I expected, and so I believe that with some real resources behind us, we'll be able to grow significantly across Australia, grow out our team so that we can develop new features and revenue streams faster, and really establish a base here so that we can start to look internationally where the real opportunity lies.
Well, you've got to my next question. You are thinking international about that one. But tell us, because I know you started with a spreadsheet. Yeah. It's like, who doesn't love a spreadsheet? North. But, here you are sort of at the app level. There must have been some magic moments, especially when the first people came together and hopefully sort of said afterwards, that was fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I try to follow that startup methodology of just starting lean with a really, really basic MVP. And I went to my monthly social group and said, hey, does anybody want to try this? I've got a very basic Google form that was literally, what's your name, what are you into, and what's your email address? And I got a bunch of people responding to that and decided, okay, well, let's bring them together and see how it goes. That first group was fantastic, but it was all people that I knew already. They gave me some great feedback, and I decided this might actually be something that there might actually be something here. From there, I had to start building out the form a lot more extensively and the spreadsheet a lot more extensively. And once we had a few hundred people, I had to build the spreadsheet so that it could actually match people up and figure out what the algorithm looked like and how that all worked. That first day of figuring that out after 6 years of having the idea in the back of my mind was perhaps the most fun day I think I've ever had in my career. And I've been documenting the entire journey along the way on my LinkedIn profile. Literally every week, it was every day for the first year, but every week I post a video at the end of the week and just say, hey, this is what's going on, this is what I've been working on, these are the ups, these are the downs. And starting a business where it's all about people meeting face to face in the middle of COVID. There were definitely some downs in that period as well, but we come through, we persevere, and here we are now.
Now, I know you're saying it's mates, not dates, but has it happened? Has there been sort of the odd, oh wow, I wasn't expecting this?
Look, to my knowledge, no. All of the stories that we've heard so far have been about people really connecting, and whether it's just for a night and having a fantastic time and feeling like they've got out of their comfort zone and enjoyed themselves, or whether they've messaged me, weeks and months later saying, I've got a brand new best friend, all thanks to you, we've gone on holidays together. And there was one person we interviewed a few weeks ago who said that, he'd been here for 6 years and didn't feel like he'd completely settled, but as a result of the friends that he's made through Fora and the wider social circle that he's gained from those people, he now feels that Sydney is home. And it's those moments really that have been the most fun outside of actually building the app, just hearing from people and hearing that we are changing people's lives.
I think that's one of the testimonials on market as part of your campaign. So just take us through the timeframes. I know it's expressions of interest at this point in time. When will it open to investors, and when have they got to sort of have their commitment in by?
Yeah, absolutely. So the expression of interest period just opened up now. That runs for 4 weeks, and so so we're looking at kind of early to mid-November is when investments will actually start being able to be made, closing right at the start of December.
And I do want to ask you, because you sort of say there's something like 200 million potential users. What is it about Sydney? Have you got any views as an English person coming out here and looking around and going, what's going on? Are we all obsessed with property and private schools? Or, why is it so damned hard to make friends here in Sydney? Yeah,
I've spoken to a lot of people about this and obviously got my own thoughts. I think there are a number of factors. I think Sydney's geography doesn't help. And the fact that we all live in suburbs that feel quite communal is fantastic, but they're often bubbles. You hear of the Manly bubble, the Bondi bubble, of people just not leaving
crossing
those
the bridge.
Places. Yeah, exactly. And I think that combined with the transportation that we have here makes things quite difficult. If you meet somebody who is from a bit further afield, you're less likely to kind of catch up with them. But there is a notion, people do say that Sydney is quite a cliquey place. For whatever reason, it seems that the friends people make here in high school and perhaps in university do really become friends for life, and I don't think that's necessarily typical of everywhere else. I'm not particularly friends with the people that I went to school with back in the UK. I speak to some of them every now and again, but for some reason it seems to form really close bonds here, and a lot of times people, or those groups, those bonds, aren't very welcoming to outsiders. People bring their partner in, and partners join, and the groups get a little bit bigger that way, but you don't often see them bringing in a new friend and somebody else coming into the groups in that kind of way.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that going on. Just finally, I do want to ask, are there any specific, we've talked about sort of, you can go for a beer and a burger in a particular pub, or you could go bowling. Has anyone sort of said, hey, I'm looking for people who are interested in something, and you thought, wow, I hadn't thought of that before?
Yeah, a fair few different kind of things. I think one of the first people to sign up said, I'm really interested in puzzles and solving puzzles. I thought that was interesting. There've been a fair...
As in jigsaws?
I think so, jigsaws, and then I kind of spoke to them about it. You get these kind of weird little boxes and contraptions and things that you need to figure out with very few instructions.
All right.
There's been a lot more pole dancers than I expected signing up on the platform. But it's all sorts. People who are into crypto, people who are into sports, people who just want to go to art galleries or everything else. But I think the key thing is that we don't bring people together with an intention of wanting to do one thing in particular. We try to encourage everybody to have an open mind, see how you meet, bring up the things that you like, and see if those people are interested in doing the same thing. And so, some of the stories we've heard have been about, for example, freediving. Someone was really keen to get into freediving for the longest time. Had never had an opportunity to do it, met someone through Fora who was into freediving, and now that's what they do every single weekend. And they've been to Bali freediving and other places, just having a good time and finally exploring and finding new activities and new hobbies.
And somewhere in the world there's probably a freediving pole dancer who really likes puzzles. Tam, great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
All the best with your on-market campaign. Look forward to following your progress with great interest and maybe finding some new mates.
I hope so. Thank you, Simon.
And that is all we have time for here on today's show, but do head to the website startupdaily.net for all the latest news. You can also find us on Twitter at StartupDailyANZ. We're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you have a great weekend. I'll see you next Friday at 2:30 p.m. Bye for now.